Week 14 of the 2022 NFL season. The Rams are down 16-10, pinned on their own 2-yard line with only a minute 45 left in the game. In the grand scheme of things, this is a meaningless game in a lost season for the Rams. Coming off their 2021-22 Super Bowl title, their veteran-led roster didn't even look the same due to all the injuries, leaving stars like Cooper Kupp, Aaron Donald, and starting quarterback Matthew Stafford sidelined. Missing their most important players led to the Rams slipping to just 3-9 heading into this matchup against the Raiders. And while LA fans were simply ready for this season to just be over with, this contest was the difference between life and death for the career of Baker Mayfield. After his fall from grace that saw him suit up for 2 teams in 2 seasons, Mayfield was given one final chance to prove himself as this starting caliber quarterback that many had no doubt that he could become once he entered the league. Following the injury to Stafford and poor performances from Bryce Perkins and John Wolford, the Rams had no choice but to pick up Mayfield. The only problem was that this would be a brand new playbook for him to learn in just 2 days, which is nearly impossible. LA dumbed it down as much as they could and just saw what happened. The final drive almost stopped dead in its tracks on 3rd down, when Mayfield threw an interception to Duron Harmon. But luckily, following a defensive pass interference penalty from Amik Robertson, the pick was not only called back, but the Rams were also given a 1st down.
Pass interference, defense number 21, replaces the spot of the foul, automatic.
Following a 9-yard sack on the next play, it appeared that the Rams were not going to be able to move the ball at all or get anything going on their last chance to win the game. However, they were bailed out yet again by a stupid unsportsmanlike conduct penalty on Jerry Tillery, where he knocked the ball out of Mayfield's hand to try to waste more clock. Despite the ball being on their own 28-yard line with only a minute 20 left in the game, Mayfield caught fire. He found Ben Skoranek for a 32-yard gain.
More light deep down the sideline, and it is caught.
And then Malcolm Brown for 9 yards before hitting Skoranek yet again for another 8 yards.
Mayfield throws, that's caught, that's a 1st down. Here's Skoranek.
With just 16 seconds remaining on the game clock, Baker was forced to spike the ball to stop the clock. And the next throw is the one that would essentially save Baker's career.
2nd and 10, Mayfield to the end zone to Jefferson. Is that possible? Touchdown.
In this brief 2024 season, Baker is lighting it up so far and making defenders look silly in the process. But how does a guy who lost his job multiple times make this insane of a comeback? While Baker has done everything to secure his starting quarterback job, there's also something that every one of you guys should all be securing: your online activity and identity when browsing the web. I'm referring to today's video partner, NordVPN. Let's say you're at a coffee shop and decide to hop on the Wi-Fi just to get some work done. Without NordVPN encrypting your activity, criminals can easily intercept your data, leading to your information getting stolen and even them spying on all your activity. Nord does a lot more than just keeping your identity hidden though. The app will also protect you from your password being leaked, sketchy website pop-ups, viruses, and even DDoS attacks for all you gamers out there. I used to be a gamer myself, so I know exactly how much it sucks getting booted offline. Head down to the description below right now and use code FANTASYPHENOMS. If you don't end up liking the product, you can get your money back within 30 days of your purchase date. Also, every purchase of a 2-year plan will receive 4 bonus months on top of it. That's nordvpn.com/fantasyphenoms. nordvpn.com/fantasyphenoms. Baker Reagan Mayfield was born on April 14, 1995 in Austin, Texas. His name came as a compromise between his parents. His mom was dead set on his name being Baker, while his dad would only agree to the idea. He was also named after former President Ronald Reagan. His father, James, worked at a private equity firm, and during Baker's youth, the family fell on some tough financial times, forcing them to move out of their home and live in rentals for the latter part of his childhood. Despite the hardships that his childhood brought, Mayfield fell in love with football and could not get enough of the game even from an early age. He grew up as a fan of the Oklahoma Sooners despite being from Texas. Baker went on to attend Lake Travis High School in Austin, and there he proved himself as one of the most promising prospects in the entire country. But this didn't happen overnight. Mayfield did not make it onto the varsity team as a quarterback until his junior year. In his first year as the team's starting quarterback, he led the team to a Division IV 4A state championship. When taking into account just how seriously high school football is taken in Texas and the talent that comes from that state, this was a very impressive feat. Mayfield was only able to play in 11 games his senior year, compared to the 16 that he took the field in during the previous season. As a result of this, he took a bit of a statistical dip. When his high school career came to an end, he had thrown for 6,255 yards, 67 touchdowns, and 8 interceptions, while picking up an additional 1,035 yards and 13 touchdowns on the ground in only 2 seasons. Along with this, he led Lake Travis to a combined 25-2 record. Despite his very impressive 2-year run as a starting QB, Baker flew a bit under the radar when it came to college scouts. ESPN gave him a 3-star rating while deeming him the 69th best quarterback in the 2013 recruiting class. He received offers from some Division I programs, but it was nothing compared to his childhood dreams of playing for Oklahoma. Mayfield received offers from Florida Atlantic, New Mexico, Rice, and Washington State. However, he shockingly chose not to attend any of them. He later went on to say that he could have easily gone to Florida Atlantic, but his father pushed him to attend a bigger school, thinking that it would be an easier path for NFL scouts, get more eyes on him, and Baker would have the chance to make it to the league. As a result of this, he wound up walking on at Texas Tech. Even though he was a walk-on at Texas Tech, it didn't take him long at all to wow the coaching staff, and he made history as the first walk-on freshman to start in a Week 1 matchup. He proved the coach's gutsy decision right in his first ever start. While they were taking on a much inferior Southern Methodist team, Mayfield took care of business, throwing for 413 yards and 4 touchdowns on an insane 60 pass attempts. Along with this, he picked up an additional 16 yards and a score on the ground. After leading Texas Tech to a 5-0 record in his first 5 starts, things got a little tougher for Mayfield, suffering a knee injury that kept him sidelined for the next 4 weeks. The Red Raiders got off to a slow start in Mayfield's return to the field, losing 3 straight games to Big 12 opponents Kansas State, Baylor, and Texas. During this 3-game losing skid, Texas Tech was outscored by a combined 153-76. It was clear that Mayfield was still a bit shaken up from his knee injury and was playing well below the standards that he set for himself during the first half of the season. He failed to throw for a touchdown in 2 of these 3 matchups and also only threw 4 touchdowns to his 4 interceptions. Despite his freshman year ending on a bit of a sour note, this was still an insanely impressive campaign for Baker. It's rare that a walk-on ever sees the field in their freshman season, let alone becoming a starter in week number 1 and performing at the level that Mayfield did. While he was only able to suit up in 8 games, he still recorded 2,315 yards, 12 touchdowns, and 9 interceptions through the air, and 190 yards and 3 touchdowns on the ground. Following this impressive freshman season, Mayfield made the decision to live out his childhood dreams and play for Oklahoma. However, college football was set up much differently in 2014 than it is now. As a result of the transfer, Baker was forced to sit out an entire year, leading to him missing all of the 2014 season. Despite this, after spending an entire year watching from the sidelines, he was more than ready to prove himself once again when his name was called to take the reins at quarterback in 2015. Similar to his start at Texas Tech, Mayfield showed out in his debut at Oklahoma against a much worse opponent, this time the Akron Zips. He finished the contest with 388 yards and 3 touchdowns through the air with a rushing score. He rattled off 4 wins in his first 4 games as a Sooner, but his first loss came in the Red River rivalry against Texas. This was the only loss that the Sooners would take in the regular season. Outside of their game against Texas, Baker tormented Big 12 defenses, including a revenge game against his former team where he threw for 212 yards and 2 touchdowns and leading Oklahoma to a 63-27 blowout win. After winning the Big 12 and finishing the regular season with an 11-1 record, the Sooners earned the 4th seed in the college football playoff. They were forced to match up against top-seeded Clemson in the first round of the playoffs, taking them on in the Orange Bowl. This was a matchup between 2 future starting NFL quarterbacks, with Deshaun Watson starting for Clemson. Mayfield and the Sooners were outmatched in this one and fell by a final score of 37-17. While this was another season for Baker that ended on a sour note, he once again made history, leading Oklahoma to their first ever playoff berth. He finished the year throwing for 3,700 yards, 36 touchdowns, and only 7 interceptions, while completing 68.1% of his pass attempts, leading the Big 12 in both passing touchdowns and completion percentage. This earned him the title of Big 12 Offensive Player of the Year. Following this incredible incredible debut at Oklahoma, the 2016 season did not get off on the right foot at all. They were ranked as the third best team in all of college football and took on a very talented 15th seeded Houston in the opening game. Shockingly, the Sooners fell by a final score of 33-23, which dropped them all the way down to 14th the following week. While they were able to rebound against Louisiana Monroe, they fell once again in week number 3, this time to Ohio State in devastating fashion. With 2 losses to their name just 3 weeks into the season, it was clear that the Sooners' hopes to return to the playoffs for a second consecutive year had come and gone. However, this loss to Ohio State was the final time that Oklahoma was defeated the entire year. Mayfield was able to finally get his first career win against Texas. He was also on the winning side of one of the greatest duels between 2 quarterbacks in college football history. This matchup took place when Mayfield made a return to Jones AT&T Stadium, where he took on Texas Tech. This was far from as easy of a win as it was the year prior, and this mainly came as a result of the Red Raiders' new quarterback, Patrick Mahomes. This game was an absolute shootout, but Baker and the Sooners came out on top by a final score of 66-59. Baker finished the contest with 545 yards and 7 touchdowns through the air on only 36 passing attempts. In comparison, Mahomes threw for 734 yards, 5 touchdowns, and 1 interception on 88 pass attempts. This is one of the highest scoring games in NCAA history, and once again proved Mayfield as one of the most talented quarterbacks that college football had to offer. Oklahoma's season ended with a 35-19 win over Auburn in the Sugar Bowl. Mayfield once again finished the year with a very impressive stat line, throwing for 3,965 yards, 40 touchdowns, and 8 interceptions while completing 70.9% of his passes. This completion percentage went on to be the best in all of college football in that 2016 season. After having their playoff hopes squashed so early in the 2016 season, Mayfield and the Sooners were on a revenge tour in 2017. After a dominant win in week 1 against UTEP, they took on the second-ranked Ohio State team on the road. Despite losing by 21 points just a year prior, the Sooners were able to flip the script, taking this game by a final score of 31-16. Mayfield torched a very talented Buckeye defense that included players like Denzel Ward and Nick Bosa for 386 yards and 3 touchdowns. After the game, Mayfield took a team flag from the cheerleaders and planted it firmly in the middle of Ohio State's logo at the 50-yard line. This is still one of the most disrespectful moments in college football history. Just 2 games following their elite showing against Ohio State, Oklahoma was stunned at home in a game against Iowa State, which they fell by a final score of 38-31. After this loss, they fell to 12th in the top 25 rankings, and it was clear that they would have to win out to have any chance of making the playoffs. Towards the tail end of the regular season, Mayfield had a moment of disrespect that might have even topped his flag plant against Ohio State. This game came against Kansas. Before the game, Jayhawks players refused to shake Mayfield or his teammates' hand. It was clear that he took this to heart, not only that he was disrespected, but also his teammates. This lit a fire in him, and he spent the rest of the game doing everything in his power to demoralize the Jayhawks. Things came to a boiling point when a Kansas corner took a cheap shot on him after Mayfield threw a pass. Following a 3-yard touchdown pass to Mark Andrews, he was seen taunting them and grabbing his crotch in a moment of total disrespect. While the announcers brought up the point that this was something that NFL GMs did not want to see, it was a clear display of Mayfield's passion for the game at the very least. The fire that was lit inside of him during the pregame coin toss continued to grow throughout the game and led to him putting on a performance to remember, throwing for 257 yards and 3 touchdowns. Oklahoma finished the season with an 11-1 record and took down TCU in the Big 12 championship 41-17. This secured them a second trip to the playoffs, this time taking on a 3rd-seeded Georgia. In his final college game ever, Mayfield was narrowly defeated by a final score of 54-48, but he put on an incredible send-off performance, throwing for 287 yards and 2 touchdowns against an elite Bulldogs defense. In his senior season, Baker racked up 4,627 yards, 43 touchdowns, and just 6 interceptions while completing 70.5% of his passes. He once again led the Big 12 in passing touchdowns and the entire NCAA in completion percentage. This earned him another Big 12 Offensive Player of the Year award, a unanimous All-American selection, and a Heisman Trophy. Heading into the draft, scouts were extremely high on Mayfield. NFL.com ranked him as the best quarterback in the entire draft. He was drawing comparisons to former greats like Brett Favre, Drew Brees, and even Doug Flutie. The Cleveland Browns did not hesitate at all to take him with the first overall pick, in hopes that he would finally be the one to fill the role of a franchise quarterback. Now, being the starting quarterback for the Cleveland Browns is a position that countless players have tried to hold on to, but no one particularly has thrived in it. However, early on, Mayfield looked like he could end up developing into that guy. He was coming into an awful situation with Cleveland going 0-16 for only the second time in NFL history. If anybody was going to be able to pull them out of this hole, it was going to be a player like Baker, someone who had been an underdog and doubted at almost every level of football that he played in since being a walk-on at Texas Tech. He saw action for the first time in Week 3 against the New York Jets after Tyrod Taylor went down with an injury. While he was unable to find the end zone in this game, Mayfield had a great debut, throwing for 201 yards while completing 73.9% of his passes. Best of all, he led the Browns to their first win in over a year. He was given the keys to the franchise for the remainder of the season and took over the starting role. It was clear that even with Mayfield playing at a high level, the Browns were not going to become a playoff contender overnight. But there was flashes where it looked like Mayfield was going to have a very promising future in Cleveland. The strongest showing from his rookie year came in Week 12 when the Browns took on the Bengals. After putting on a 3-touchdown performance while only throwing 3 incompletions against the Falcons, Baker followed that up with a 258-yard, 4-touchdown game in a 35-20 win over Cincinnati.
Mayfield to sit back there and spin it. Here he goes to the end zone. Caught! Mayfield. Njoku tries to leap, and he does right into the grass, but they push him in! Touchdown!
By the time the regular season came to an end, Baker had thrown for 3,725 yards, 27 touchdowns, and 14 interceptions with a completion percentage of 63.8. Along with this, he led Cleveland to a 7-7 record in the 14 games that he played in. He was in the running for Offensive Rookie of the Year, but was beaten by New York Giants running back Saquon Barkley. After a very promising rookie season, Baker took a bit of a step back in the 2019 season. Heading into the year, some looked at the Browns as Super Bowl hopefuls with the addition of Odell Beckham Jr. in the offseason, but he was beginning to show the downsides that came with playing his gunslinger style of football. The season got off to an awful start in which he threw 3 interceptions in a 43-13 pounding by the Titans. This was a trend of things to come, as Mayfield was only able to throw for more touchdowns than interceptions in just 6 of the 16 games that he played in. This was arguably the worst season of his entire NFL career, and many began to doubt his abilities to truly be the savior at quarterback that the Browns needed. By the time this year came to an end, he had thrown for 22 touchdowns to his 21 interceptions, while also posting a career-low 59.4% completion percentage. Despite his shortcomings this season, the Browns still posted a record of 6-10. Now, the roller coaster of Baker's time in Cleveland continued in the 2020 season. He played more like his rookie self rather than the version of himself the year prior. Throughout the entire season, Mayfield's passes were coming off his hand more accurately, and his decision-making had greatly improved from the year prior. He had the Browns playing at an extremely high level and led them to an 11-5 record. This earned the team their first playoff appearance in 18 years. The wildcard round, they took on a much more playoff season Pittsburgh Steelers team. Baker put on a show, throwing for 263 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 0 interceptions in a dominant 48-37 showing.
Mayfield, quick throw, caught over the middle by Landry. Jarvis Landry inside the 10, and Jarvis.
In the divisional round, they took on the Kansas City Chiefs, and while they appeared to be heavily outmatched coming into the game, Mayfield was able to keep them competitive, and it even looked like they might have a chance to win late in the game. However, when the final whistle sounded, the Chiefs held a 22-17 lead, and Cleveland's Cinderella run was finally put to an end. The 2021 season was a bit of a letdown, both for Baker and the Browns. He suffered a partially torn labrum in the team's Week 2 matchup against the Houston Texans. While he powered through and played in 14 games that season, he was forced to change his throwing motion, and it clearly had an effect on his passing ability. Despite his shoddy performance throughout the regular season, this gesture of continuing to play for his teammates, even through a nagging injury, once again put on the display of Baker Mayfield's dedication to his teammates and the game. His time with the Browns finally came to an end after this season, and even when he was no longer on the team, countless Cleveland teammates came out to speak highly of Baker's character and how he was a great locker room guy. But the Browns had their sights set on Deshaun Watson, and consequently traded Mayfield to the Carolina Panthers for a conditional 2024 draft pick. This was not an ideal situation for Mayfield, but he won the starting spot for the Panthers heading into the 2022 season and did have a chance at another revenge game taking on the Browns in week number 1. While he did have a solid game throwing for 235 yards and a touchdown, they came up just short of getting the win, losing by a final score of 26-24. He started the following 4 games and was only able to pull out 1 win. His 1 touchdown to 3 picks in his final 2 games led to him getting benched for the next 5 weeks. In the final game that he played for the Panthers, he had a 0 touchdown, 2 interception showing before once again being benched. 2 weeks following this, the Panthers announced that they were going to release Baker Mayfield. Now, after not being able to hold on to the starting spot on one of the worst teams in the league, many began to wonder if Baker's career was doomed. It didn't take long for him to find a new home though with the Los Angeles Rams, and this takes us back to where we started this video off with his masterful 2-minute drill that gave them the win over the Las Vegas Raiders. This heroic game-winning touchdown pass won him the starting job in LA for the remainder of the season. While the Rams had no hopes of making the playoffs, even if Baker played completely perfect football, it did give him a chance to prove the coaching staffs around the league that he was more than capable of being a starting quarterback in the NFL. His best game with the Rams came in week 16 when they took on the Broncos. Mayfield had a great day through the air, throwing for 230 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 0 interceptions. LA also won in dominant fashion by a final score of 51-14. In the offseason, the Tampa Bay Bucs signed Baker to a 1-year deal to prove his worth. This was the perfect situation for him. However, he was forced to follow up Tom Brady, who had spent the previous 3 seasons as the team's starting QB. It was not going to be easy. Mayfield's back was against the wall yet again. His contract was set up to where if he did not perform well, the Bucs would not have to sign him back, and he would likely never get another chance to be a week 1 starter in the NFL. But like many times in his career, when his back was against the wall, he rose to the occasion and performed at his best ability. He had the best season of his career in 2023, setting career highs in passing yards with 4,044, passing touchdowns with 28, and a completion percentage of 64.3%. Along with this, he led Tampa Bay to a 9-8 record, earning them a spot in the playoffs. For the first time in his career, Baker was a Pro Bowler and had a chance to make an underdog run in the playoffs. In the first round, they took on a very good Philadelphia Eagles team who were dominant on both sides of the ball in the regular season. Let's say halfway up to the regular season, then their defense really began to fall off. But regardless, Baker not only led the Bucs to an upset, he completely dismantled the Eagles defense, throwing for 337 yards and 3 touchdowns in a 32-9 win. In the divisional round, they played another elite team in the Detroit Lions. While Tampa Bay did fall a little bit short by a final score of 31-23, Baker still had a very good performance, 300 yards, 3 touchdowns on the day. Now, early in this 2024 season, Baker has been one of the best performers at the quarterback position. While only time will tell if he's able to keep up this pace, if he is, this is going to be another career year from a player who was on the fritz of not being signed to a roster just a couple of years prior. It's pretty clear to me that Baker has proven himself as a more than capable starting quarterback in Tampa Bay, and it's crazy to think that if he didn't have that game-winning touchdown pass against the Raiders, there's a strong chance that none of what has happened in Tampa Bay would have been possible.
Mayfield gonna run again. Baker up the middle, inside the 5. Mayfield lunging, touchdown! What an answer!